Hello and welcome to Change India, experiments with big ideas. In this four-part series, we will look at ideas which appear simple but could be transformational in addressing problems that have dogged India for decades. The key, as always, would be execution and implementation. Today, we are going to discuss the idea of setting up a new payments bank, which is a joint venture between Aadhar, which is currently in a bit of a controversy, and we shall discuss that too, and India Post.
Aadhar, a simple idea with boundless potential. In 2009, the UPA government rolled out the Aadhar scheme, which is capable of not only providing an identity to 1.2 billion Indians, but also link their unique identity number to a bank account. But in a country where commercial banks are inaccessible to 60% of its citizens, even today, this potential remains untapped. Reaching the remotest corners of India through nearly 2 lakh post offices, India Post is much more than a national postal service, a beacon of hope and good news. Our big idea is to enable India Post to function as a payments bank by linking it to the Aadhar card, instantly ensuring that 60 crore Indians have access to basic banking services.
This big idea has the potential of taking India's banking coverage from just 4 out of 10 Indians to 10 out of 10. To debate this idea, we have on a satellite link from Mumbai, Shankar Iyer, journalist and author. And joining us on another satellite link from Chennai is Bindu Ananth, president of the IFMR Trust, an organization committed to financial inclusion. With them is Dheeraj Nair, CEO of Network 18's Think India Foundation. Now let's begin with the current controversies around Aadhar. And Shankar, there is a lot of negativity around Aadhar. There are calls to junk it, essentially on grounds of privacy infringements and the fact that it doesn't have legislative backing. What's your sense? Should this idea be junked, or is it reformable, and then can be put to good use?
Well, to start with, I think the opposition is more in terms of whose idea it is and how it has been implemented. This was the biggest idea of the UPA, and they failed it so miserably, it's unbelievable. I mean, the Americans have a phrase that the animals eat their young. The UPA has done effectively that. So I think that the problem with Aadhar is that the UPA shied away and sort of neglected giving it a legislative statutory backup.
Right.
After all, you're collecting data about people,
right,
and this concerns privacy issues.
Right.
And it also concerns the issue of integrity as to where it is being hosted. Now, I know that eventually it will be hosted with the National Population Register, but governments can't take years to fix what is a necessary statutory issue.
Right. So
I think the objection is not so much to the idea, but the identity of Aadhar.
Okay, so let me go across to Bindu. Quickly, Bindu, if you can tell us how to fix these two problems. Is it as simple as saying that we'll get the law passed by the new government and then we are fine to go, or something else needs to be done to fix Aadhar?
So, from a financial inclusion perspective, I think Aadhar is important because it solves 2 important problems. One is the whole KYC issue. How do you go about establishing KYC for millions of individuals who don't yet have a bank account? And the second is authentication, to say what is a secure way to establish for every transaction the identity of the customer. I think for years we've done this without Aadhar, without biometrics. So I'm sure there is a version of this that can be done, but it would be a shame to lose the momentum of Aadhar, because I think this can truly accelerate the pace at which financial inclusion happens. So the political issues aside, I think technically it's very, very important for financial inclusion.
Right. So Dheeraj, the consensus seems to be it's too good a thing to just junk, which is what the debate is around. I'll very quickly want to understand from you, will legislation solve it, or is there something in the design and architecture of the scheme that needs to be worked on as well?
Well, I mean, there are always small technical flaws in a scheme of this scale. I mean, you're trying to give unique ID numbers based on biometrics to 1 billion people. Now, that itself is a massive exercise, and there's been turf wars between the National Population Register and the Aadhar. So there are technical issues. I'm sure some machines don't work well, some don't pick up fingerprints. Those are issues which are solvable. But I think the big thing is the legislation.
Right.
And to get legislation done, you need to persuade people. Now, the Congress, for some reason, despite it being a great idea of theirs, and probably the flag should have been the flagship of UPA too, failed to get the backing for it. I hope whichever government takes office doesn't abandon it and builds the necessary consensus to pass the legislation, because once it has a legal backing, once privacy issues are sorted, backed by a legal framework, then I think the resistance will reduce.
This idea that we are propagating of a joint venture between Aadhar and Indian Post. Bindu, the thought is that if you were to do this, if you were to put these two things together, then you would be expanding India's savings base dramatically, because you would get many more people into the banking system who would then place their deposits with you. Are you in sync? Any estimate of where this could go?
So I have a slightly different take on the concept. I mean, the payments bank really implies two things. One, that you can, as an institution, you can take deposits and do payments.
Right.
But all your liabilities will be invested in government securities. In other words, no lending. And what I'm describing now is exactly what the Indian postal system is today.
Right.
So we don't have a form and nomenclature called payments bank, but it perhaps comes closest to being a payments bank. So I think we don't need a lot of organizational, institutional changes. To my mind, two things need to change to make the post office even more powerful in the realm of payments. One is that the post office at the panchayat level typically tends to be operated by a franchisee. We need to bring all of these nodes into the common network. Today, a lot of the last mile post offices still remain out of the network. And the second thing is interoperability with the banking system. So let India Post continue to do the good work that it's doing.
Right.
But is there a way I can walk into my neighborhood post office and transact not just with the post office, but with the entire banking sector?
Right.
And I think with that, with those minor tweaks, you actually get a lot of power in the existing system.
Shankar, the finance ministry hasn't been very convinced. Of course, they haven't looked at it as a joint venture between Aadhar and India Post. They're looking upon India Post as a full-fledged bank, and they've got reservations on that. But as Bindu just described, we are talking about a payments bank only, which in a sense, frankly, India Post has been. It collects money from people, puts it into postal savings, and it is also able to send money out through post office transfers, etc. So in a very crude sort of way, it already is a payments bank. So what the reservation is?
Well, to start with, I think it's more about turf wars and who should be doing what and how you will regulate these things. But I want to get into this idea of Aadhar. I mean, I wrote about this a few weeks back, and some years back I had argued that India Post should be a bank and a logistics company and get listed on the bourses. My simple idea is that the 12-digit number that an Aadhar person gets should be the bank account number.
Right.
You already have an operationally payment gateway, NECS and others. You know, some of the operations are already in. So this electronic 12-digit number should become your bank account number, and everybody down the line, India Post should become the mother, or maybe the State Bank of India or whoever. But the person who holds the 12-digit number should have the choice to transact through that 12-digit number,
right,
using every other stream of financial activity, whether it's credit card, prepaid cards, debit cards, whether it's banks, ATMs, whatever. They should be able to use them as business correspondents. And the India Post idea looks good, sounds good, because beyond and above anybody else, they have the reach,
right,
and they have the credibility of being owned by the sovereign.
Right. Right. So you know, it is an idea which is workable. After, let's take a short break right now, but I want to then talk about how efficient this idea will be. What kind of evidence have we got from the ground through pilot programs which suggest that this could work? And then we want to really see how to get it done. So we'll take a short break. You stay right there and come back. back to Change India, experiments with big ideas, and today we are looking at a potential joint venture between Aadhar and the Indian Post to create a payments bank which will make it much easier for cash and other benefits to be transferred directly to beneficiaries all over India. Will bring financial inclusion in the sense that every Indian would be a bank account holder, not just the 4 out of 10 that currently is the situation. And it would also expand the savings base of the country, because we are talking about a bank which will accept deposits of about 50,000 to a maximum about 1 lakh and no more than that. We're also talking about only a payments bank. Therefore, it doesn't get into the situation of taking credit risks and giving out loans, which requires a different level of sophistication. We're also saying it should be run by a professional CEO, and we are saying no need for any further checks. If you have an Aadhar number, that Aadhar number becomes your bank account. That is also all the verification that you need for Know Your Customer. Dheeraj.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very doable. It's both are, as it happens, government-owned entities, Aadhar and India Post. We are not recommending anything radical about privatization or corporatization. And as Shankar said earlier, that there is an advantage in these being sovereign properties.
Right.
People would have faith in them. People would have credibility in them. So I think it can be government-owned, but it would be preferable if it's run professionally.
Right.
So there's no harm in getting expertise, getting a professional CEO and professional management, and then taking it from there.
But Reserve Bank of India has been a bit wary, should I say, about letting this Indian postal bank idea go forward. Yeah. And there's talk of where will they get the capital from. Yeah. But in our model, we are talking about a payments bank only, which doesn't require that much capital and requires a different sort of approval, right?
Yeah, so we need a fraction of the 1,500 crore capital which a regular bank needs. And this bank is not going to be doing lending. So the RBI's concerns about expertise and other things are not so important here. It's just going to take deposits, right?
Right.
So a lot of the sophistication, as you said, and a lot of the complications, the risks are not there in this entity that we are suggesting. So I think the RBI and the government need to consider this as a different sort of bank.
Right.
I mean, the problem in India also is that we only look at banking as one sort of plain vanilla banking means lending, taking deposits. So look at it as a different kind of bank and give it a license accordingly.
Right. Bindu, what's holding the RBI up? I mean, this idea of a payments bank, is it because it's just too new in the system and RBI hasn't got its arms around the concept? Why have they been so wary about taking this concept forward, particularly in the manner that we've talked about with India Post?
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that the most recent licensing round was keeping a universal bank framework in mind. And I think the whole notion of specialized banks or differentiated banks, be it payment banks or wholesale banks, is a fairly new idea. RBI put it out first in its discussion paper sometime in October last year, and the Nachiket More committee followed it up with some specific proposals. So I do think it's a new idea, and the postal system as a payment bank seems a much more natural fit than as a universal bank.
So the contours that we've drawn up in our proposal, and we've talked about a paid up capital for the bank, which is much lower than the minimum 1,500 crore threshold that the RBI talks about for a universal bank. Also the fact that the maximum deposit that this banking entity should take is 1 lakh, no more than that. Are these prudent safeguards? Can these be relaxed a bit? Can more be done?
I think on the capital side, certainly there is a good logic to say that the entry-level capital requirements can be lower than a universal bank, because you're not engaged in credit activity, so capital adequacy in the sense of credit is not quite relevant. What you need capital for is for automation, for building minimum infrastructure, for managing operations risk. So I think the Nachiket More committee had suggested a number like 50 crores, for example,
right,
as an appropriate number for differentiated banks, and that sounds like a reasonable thought.
So, Shankar, your sense of these parameters that we've laid out, what Bindu suggested that even something as conservative as a 50 crore equity capital base for a payments only bank would suffice. Therefore, all the concern that the finance ministry has, or even the RBI has, on how this large equity base of 1,500 crores would be A, raised and B, utilized, that goes out. And the fact that we're also curtailing the kind of amount of deposit that this system would take. Are these again, can we relax them a bit? Are we being too conservative, or should we take it one step at a time?
Well, I think we are being conservative. And why are we imposing constraints? I am wrestling with the idea, the constraints that we seem to have created around the idea. For a $2 trillion economy where the government borrows something like 69 crores every hour, a 1,500 crore capital for a sovereign-owned India Post shouldn't be such a big deal. And let's face it, the poor who we want to include into the financial system are not looking just for a post office in that sense of finance. They are looking for the whole play. So here, I mean, this is not a new idea. Schumpeter spoke about the connection between financial inclusion and growth as early as in 1911. So here is the opportunity. I still think that we should make it broader.
Okay, so you're saying we can go much more aggressive with this. Dheeraj, I think the concern of the government is that there already are so many public sector banks which are wrestling with bad debts. If they were to now create one more entity, which is again government owned, rather than in the private sector, which is the new philosophy, which has been the philosophy for the last decade, then they are wary about that.
Yeah. No, I have sympathy with what Shankar is saying in the sense that there's no reason why we can't have one more public sector bank which can reach out to the remaining 6 out of 10 people who are excluded. But at the moment, it doesn't seem realistic. It's not going to happen. The RBI is not minded to do so. So in the interim, let it start as a payments bank with a much lower paid up capital.
Right.
Once it gets a customer base, a depositor base, which it will, then we can at the next stage talk about going into a full-fledged commercial bank, perhaps even corporatizing India Post, part privatizing it. But I think that would be a second step rather than put it all at on the table right now and then the RBI will say, sorry, nothing can happen, not even a payments bank.
Also, quickly, before we end this, this show, I want to get a sense of what has been the experience with the efficiency of this system of direct cash transfers. Because ultimately, that's the bedrock of what we are proposing, that if we set up an entity like this, then our ability to do direct cash transfers to beneficiaries is going to be of a far more efficient order than currently exists. But what has been the efficiency of that whole paradigm? Shankar?
Well, you know, the problem has been at the end of the government, which ascribes entitlements, quantums, who gets how much money, for what purpose, what is the subsidy transfer that's happening. And the ministries have been pathetic in creating the digital database that is required for these transfers to take place. This is not a rocket science, Raghav. You have a 12-digit number.
Right.
You punch in the amount, it lands in the clearance system. What is the big deal? I mean, you know, the problem is whenever you ask government departments and ministries to try out something, instead of a fail-safe one, we prove that it will fail. So I don't think the efficiency of this has been tried out, and you know it requires a certain championing of it.
Right,
that will make it work.
Dheeraj, a very simple and a very powerful idea. Yeah. If the concern is that you are underbanked, everyone who has an Aadhar number actually becomes a bank account holder automatically.
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant idea. And the fact of life is that, Raghav, whether we like it or not, government spending on entitlement schemes is not going to go away tomorrow, no matter which government is there.
Absolutely.
So the point is to make them efficient, and people need that transfer. And why not transfer it to the bank account rather than let it leak through 100 intermediaries on the way?
So there you are. It's a simple idea. It's a simple idea, but it's a big idea. With one fell swoop, you can get financial inclusion going in the country, and that's got a lot of downstream benefits. So we hope the next Prime Minister will be listening into this. Thank you very much for being with us on this show.